Welcome back to Beyond the Scale. If it's your first time here with us, we're so thrilled to have you. And if you've joined us before, we're so excited to see you again. We hope that you'll like, subscribe, and leave us some feedback. We always love to hear what you have to say. And if you have things you'd like to see or certain people interviewed, please let us know in the comments below. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Laura Spath is a knowledgeable, supportive presence in the carnivore community. She has an amazing podcast in collaboration with Judy Cho called Cutting Against the Grain. Laura has been working on overcoming food addiction since January of 2019 and has lovingly shared all the parts of her journey with us, from work to travel to restaurant eating and sharing her cooking, meals, prep, and carnivore shopping with us, as well as her journey with her husband and children as carnivores. Laura is a wealth of information, and we're so delighted to have her here today to share more of her journey, tips, and tricks of the trade. Thanks for being here, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
Laura, welcome, and just thank you so much for your time and for being here with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the how and why you got to carnivore? How did you get to this point?
Sure. So, I mean, I was always looking for a way to lose weight. And that's the biggest part of it for me, was how I started carnivore and figured out about it in the first place. Was I was just like, oh, this is another way that I'm promised that I can lose weight. And, you know, whether or not that was a good way for me to find it, that's how I got here. And I think over time, I had lost weight in my life many, many, many different ways, but I had never been able to keep it off before. And it wasn't until finding carnivore did I start having all kinds of other healing and from other health issues, digestive issues. I felt better. I lost weight in combination with kind of making other lifestyle changes as well. But that was finally the first time where it wasn't torturous to be eating this way. And I wasn't constantly waiting to go back to how I was eating before. And so, while I truly think, you know, you could lose weight on the potato diet, it doesn't mean it's healthy. And so this was kind of where weight loss combined with a healthy lifestyle, combined with, you know, taking away a lot of my emotional cravings, me focusing on my deeper relationship with food, kind of all of those things culminated into carnivore being this best thing for me. And so while I do think that people come here for weight loss, a lot of times we end up staying long-term because it ends up being such a powerful tool in a way that we can live our lives long-term.
I agree, for sure. The attraction a lot of the time is weight loss, but then you start seeing all these other things healing, and that's what really means the most and gets you to stay.
Knowing a bit about your story, when you started doing carnivore, you lost a lot of weight and you were under eating, over fasting, over exercising maybe, and you reached a weight that you wanted to, but you had problem with your health, you had health issues. And how did you decide to take a balance between your ideal weight and your ideal health?
I mean, that's definitely not an easy thing to kind of wrap your head around, the fact that like I physically, aesthetically want to be skinnier, but my body tells me that's not healthy. And it's a really hard thing to break out of, to say that like my hormones weren't great. So I am definitely a very obsessive person. I can, you know, kind of handle things from an extreme standpoint. And so when I was in weight loss mode, I was losing weight. I didn't know how to stop being focused on just like, you know, super aggressive weight loss. And so, you know, I think this natural ability for everybody to regulate how much they're eating, how often they're eating, this, you know, like I'm not somebody who can just eat as much as I want, stop when I'm full. Like I kind of do everything to the extreme. And so even during carnivore, I got to a point where I was under eating and over fasting and over exercising kind of all at the same time in an effort to try to hit what I thought was an ideal body aesthetic. And that's really what had me end up being too thin.
I was just wondering, Laura, I really identify with the fact that you have talked about food addiction a lot. And I wondered if you would talk about how carnivore has sort of been the thing that has finally brought you to a place of peace with your eating.
I think the hardest thing, the easiest thing about carnivore is that there's a lot less trigger foods. You know, trying to do keto, there's the sweets, there's the artificial sweeteners. It's the replacement foods for the bad things that I wanted. When I want ice cream and I'm eating a keto ice cream, it just makes me want real ice cream. And I can't moderate that. I can't eat a small amount of keto ice cream just because it says keto on it. And it's also why even in the carnivore space, I don't do the carnivore ice creams. I haven't gotten into the butter, eating the frozen butter thing that a lot of people do, because those to me are just replacements for the bad foods that I was eating before. And I think it's great if people can moderate those. But what is the most helpful for me about carnivore is that I don't have replacements for all of these trigger foods for myself. I'm able to just eat the foods that make me feel good. And I'm not dealing with this obsessive mentality of like, how do I stop eating this food? And I think even sometimes in carnivore, we see people like looking for replacements of these addictive food behaviors. And so when I took out all of my replacements, I then had to focus on, why do I want to eat right now? And it's not because I'm hungry, and it's not because I need food, and it's not because I'm, my body needs any nourishment. It's because I'm stressed, or I'm bored, or I'm anxious, or I'm, excited. Like there's a lot of other reasons why we were eating. And when I took out all of those replacement foods, then I truly had to address that. And so that's what carnivore helped kind of take away all of those triggers for me. And it's why I'm really careful to not include some of the other ones that I think that I personally would not be able to moderate.
Can I ask, now that you've discovered those things, that you are using food for, what are some sort of like new behaviors or new activities maybe that you've picked up in place of, maybe I would have, been eating over this before?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize how much of my day was spent around food and snacking and just spending time eating or thinking about eating. And so I kind of joke that I had to get a hobby. Like when I stopped snacking all day, I needed something to do. And in the very beginning, it was like crocheting while I was watching TV, because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't eating. And then now it's like, I went through a paint by number phase in 2020 because I needed something to keep me away from the fridge and busy my hands and my mind. Now I'm in like a puzzle phase, or it's something as simple as like just preventing myself from going to the kitchen, because then how many times are we standing in front of the pantry and standing in front of the fridge or the freezer, even as a carnivore, and just standing there like, wait a second, what am I doing? How did I get here? I was in the office. How did I get in front of the fridge? And like, what am I doing with myself right now? And so finding a way to keep myself away from the fridge, during 2020, when all of a sudden I was home all the time, I was working from home, I wasn't used to having access to food full time. And I would get up from a meeting and walk to the fridge and eat a couple slices of cheese. Well, when you do that 10 times a day, that's a tremendous amount of food that my body didn't need. And so I had to find a way to just keep myself out of the kitchen. And it's really not even letting myself walk in there. Maybe it's walk around the block, or I did a lot of like, go into the driveway and just kind of sit for a little bit and give myself a little bit of warmth and like find a way to take a mental break that didn't have me going to the fridge. But I definitely had to get a hobby, that's for sure.
I feel like you're describing my life exactly, from the obsessive behavior to the addiction to needing, I knit now. So I can relate to all of that. Wow.
And I think that's why I felt very isolated and very alone with the things that I was struggling about. And I remember just sharing something, making my first YouTube video or something, and sharing online about how I felt. And it was so many people like you and, like who said like, wait, this is how I feel. And it was so reassuring to me to realize that like, okay, wait, maybe I'm not broken. maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I'm not the only one who's struggling with these things. And I have nowhere along the way claimed to be an expert in any of this. I'm still figuring this out on my own, but it is so helpful for me to know that I am not alone in figuring all of this out, and that there are so many of us who are really working through this together. And that's where I think this sense of the community has been really helpful for me, is because it holds me accountable, because I'm like, I want to do this. I want to stay, on track, and I want to make this work because I want other people to know that it's possible as well. And it's definitely been a big part of the positive community piece for me.
And speaking about staying on track, are you always staying on track, or do you have some meals or something like this happening sometimes?
I will say I spent the first year and a half probably with like not one morsel of anything that was carnivore. Like 2018, 2019, losing the weight, I was like beyond. 2020, I've been very open. I lost my way, and I didn't know how to balance that in any sense of the word. The stress or emotions, like my emotions would get a hold of me again, and I would eat half a jar of peanut butter that, like unwillingly, I guess, or like before I knew what had happened, that it was an emotional reaction. And I spent a lot of 2021 like figuring out again how to be consistent. And I will say that there are never moments that in the last, year and a half or so, since I've been really, really focusing, the biggest thing I've been focusing on the last 2 years has been consistency. And there's just no more of these major weight fluctuations again. I want to say two things about this. There are never moments anymore where, as an emotional reaction, I eat something like unintentionally that I don't want, right? Or it's like I have this like emotional trigger, and I find myself like hiding food and binging and like all of these things. I have completely found a way to focus through that. I also have figured out which foods am I able to moderate and have, and which ones can I not have ever. And so I think those two pieces have helped me now to realize that I am carnivore most of the time. But if there are times when I eat something that's not carnivore, it is a specific decision that I've made because I know that it's not something that's going to throw me off, and I'm comfortable with that. It's a very intentional decision. So I definitely don't want to, I don't know. I don't really share a lot of that because I don't want to trigger people or give people permission to do the same thing. I think sometimes we look at somebody who we relate to, like you mentioned, and then we say, oh, she's able to eat that. That means I can eat that. And I have those things. So I definitely do not claim to be perfect in any sense of the word, and have eaten things that are not carnivore, especially in the last several years. But I will say that I am very comfortable with where I am now. And I am not making those decisions and eating those foods out of an emotional reaction or out of stress or, being upset or triggered in some way. And it's a much more like, hey, let's think about this specific situation that's upcoming and happening. And I'm going to eat something on that occasion for that reason.
And that takes a lot of work and a lot of practice to figure out.
Yes.
And understand why you're making those emotional decisions, I think. And that, I think trips people up for a long time, that getting to know yourself and getting to know what triggers you emotionally, especially for people who are food addicted, you're soothing. And what is it that's making me go to this, right? I think that's it. It's a real testament to you doing the work and figuring those things out for yourself.
Yeah, and I definitely have made a lot of mistakes. That's where a lot of my weight gain in 2020 happened, and then just like really plugging along. I will say the more strict that I am, the more very specific I am, even with, I find myself getting cravings when I'm snacking too much, when I'm having the carnivore junk foods that I call it, when I find myself like nibbling and having all those carnivore processed things too often, I do find cravings, and I have to like really tighten myself up on that, because it's not just this free for all of like, if it's carnivore, I can eat as much or whenever I want. Like, I do not fall into that category at all. There is no just like normal regulation that happens for me there. So I still have to be cognizant of my habits and behaviors. And the more strict that I am, and the more specific meals that I'm eating, and, you know, kind of the cleaner that I'm eating, the better I feel. But I also I'm not gonna, I don't want to live my life that way forever. You know, I still can't tell you now, are you going to be carnivore forever? It's not like, yep, I'm just going to eat 100% meat forever for the rest of my life. I still personally take things one day at a time. I know today that's what I have to do to stay on track and to stay healthy, but I'm not going to commit to you that this is what I'm going to do forever. I can't emotionally handle that kind of a commitment. And so it's important for me to still truly take things one day at a time and one decision at a time, and just kind of really be honest with myself. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just really being honest with myself about what can I handle. And any type of major commitment for me like that, like I'm going to be carnivore forever, or even just like for 90 days or 6 months or a year, I'm 2 days in, you make a slight mistake and you're like, okay, forget it. I give up on everything. And I just am such a like, oh, I've ruined it. I'm throwing it all away. These big challenges I can't really accomplish. Like I failed, and now I'm just going to go completely off the rails. And I can't make those huge commitments anymore, because that's the alternative for me, is I just give up on everything. And so what I truly focus on now, more than anything, is this picking one small, like the non-negotiable of like, I'm going to stay carnivore, and I focus on that one day at a time. And I like to not snack, and I like to have specific fasting windows, but I really just don't put too much pressure on myself. And when I relieve that pressure and that shame, then I'm able to go into the next day and just say like, okay, today we're going to focus on being carnivore. And today we're going to focus on getting my fasting windows right and all of those things. But if there's something, if I've made a decision otherwise, or my fasting window is not perfect, or, you know, I end up eating some cheese and pepperonis at night when I probably shouldn't have, there's not this like huge element of failure and shame that I've now put on myself. It's okay, today's Wednesday and it's a new day. And like, okay, let's not do that today. And that's it. It's like, I'm just not going to do that for one day. And it really that's been, I think, my biggest mental piece in the last year and a half. And even in the last 6 months, just really focusing on one day at a time, not putting too much pressure on myself to have everything be perfect. And really, I think I said this earlier, but I'm such an obsessive person. I don't know how to do anything that's not like taking everything to the extreme. And that's been my biggest work that I've been doing on myself the last, year or so, has really been saying, how can you not do that? How can we just live every day in a realistic manner that I want to live, which is eating carnivore and staying healthy and being at a healthy weight and getting good sleep and really focusing on all of these things, but just not putting so much pressure on myself that I push it to the extreme.
Yeah, I can relate to this so much, because, looking at all the carnivore community with people doing the grounding, the red light therapy, the sauna, the cold therapy, everything, I started putting pressure to me. And,
right.
And I wanted to do everything perfect, but working 10 hours a day in the office, handling my son, handling my dog, handling the day-to-day life, I was just overwhelming myself too much, and I stopped sleeping. I reduced my sleep down to 5 hours a night, because I needed to meditate and to do some yoga before, and looking at the sunrise and the sunset, and stop.
Yes.
Now it has to be undoable, Every day I have to do something that, okay, I need to make fun, and I need to sit in front of TV and watch a crazy TV show. And come on, I love it. And even if it's 10 p.m. and it's blue light on TV, come on, that's okay.
Yes. I feel the exact same way. My full-time job is not to just be healthy. And it is sometimes we look at people who that is their full-time job. Their full-time job is to be healthy and show you how to be healthy. And that's an amazing thing, that they get to show us all of these ideas that we can do. But when we try to incorporate all of these things at the same time, it really truly is, for me, very overwhelming. And I have fallen victim to that in the past, where I try to incorporate all of these things, and I ended up very unhealthy physically and emotionally, trying to do all of the right things. That's the orthorexia, right? That's where we take this like living a healthy lifestyle to the extreme, where it itself turns into a disorder. And I know that so many of us who end up on carnivore have the tendency to go to the extreme with things, and that's why we ended up on carnivore. And so for me, it's trying to figure out how to do this in a realistic way, where I am not perfect, but I am doing this sustainably. And that has been the biggest shift, where in 2018 and 2019, I lost weight very fast because I was doing it perfectly. And I was doing it to the extreme. But then I also ended up pushing myself too far and being unhealthy and really being obsessed about it, and going to that extreme. Then I said, I can't do extreme. I'm going to pull it back on everything. And then I went completely unhealthy in the other direction. And so anytime I focus on one extreme, I swing back to the other direction. And we see that in this space as the community as a whole. It takes these like massive swings because we're doing things to an extreme. And so I like word for the year for 2021 was consistency. And that's really just been extending into 2022. And all I've been focusing on in the last couple of years is, how can I be consistent? How can this be sustainable? Right? 2022 has been all about sustainability for me. And I went from taking these like massive swings to having much smaller adjustments and fluctuations. And now I feel like I'm really in this balance of like making small adjustments day to day. And any decision that I make never lasts for more than a day. And that's just really helping me to kind of like stay in this. I made this analogy I have a locals community where we do live streams, and this analogy kind of came out, and I'm loving it lately, but it's like we're driving down the road and we feel the rumble strips on the sides of the road. And when you feel the rumble strips, you don't just yank the car in the other direction, because what's going to happen? You're going to go flying off the road in the other side. When you feel a rumble strip is there to have you make, it's a warning of like, watch out, little adjustments, go back to where you make a slight adjustment. And we drive and we feel this rumble strip and we go, okay, wait, it's a small adjustment. We can't feel that rumble strip of us getting off track and just yank ourselves to the other extreme, because we're going to cause this massive crash. And I feel like that's such a metaphor for where I've been in the last 4.5 years. Is I would get to that point where I slightly get off track, and then I would just go and completely drive off a cliff on the other side of the road. When now I'm able to feel that slight rumble strip of like, okay, maybe you're getting off track. Let's go back to the slight adjustments, really slight, simple, small movements into the wheel. And I feel like that's what's kept me on the road, going in the same direction, constantly moving forward for the last 1.5 years, and not finding myself completely getting off track or ending up in these big accidents where I'm having to like get a tow truck and pull me out of a ditch. And it's this whole big thing where I got to get back on track again. And I just am trying to not ever stop moving forward. I might hit a rumble strip now and again, but I'm not finding myself in a ditch needing a tow truck to get me back and put me back on track again. I'm just moving forward with all these little motions. So that's my new analogy I'm loving.
I love this.
Love that.
And
I
you
love
know,
analogy.
going from one extreme to the other one, July 2021, everyone was eating egg white bread. And July 2022, they are all eating egg yolk waffles.
Yes, exactly.
From
And
one
I don't want to
extreme
eat
the
either
other.
one of those. I just want to eat normal eggs. Like, I don't want either one of those things. They both sound terrible. I just want eggs. And so let me just stay here in the middle.
I so agree.
Can I ask, Laura, will you talk about your journey with your family? Your husband is carnivore as well, and both of the kids?
Yes.
And has that been that I do this pretty much by myself. So I just watch you navigate all of that. And I'm like, oh, that must be so nice, that he's on board with it too. Will you just talk about that a little bit?
And you know what, my heart breaks, and I'm so every time somebody says that they are doing this alone, especially without like a spouse or somebody in their house, I want to stand up and cheer for you and hug you and cry, because I don't know if would be strong enough to do that. And I know, like, I just makes me emotional to think about, because I don't know if I could have done this without Chris doing it as well, because I am not that strong. And those of you who are doing it, like, I applaud you, and I want to give you all of the support, because you have to be so strong to do that. And I know that Chris and I both have really only been able to sustain this long term because we both are doing it together. And like, I can be stressed and frustrated and wanting to have cravings, and he'll talk me out of it. And then I'll talk him out of it other times. And, you know, all of those, having somebody call me out and keep me on track is also so helpful, versus if I had somebody who was like, just order food or whatever, and like, just eat it, like, or pressuring me, or even if that food was around, like, those things would be so difficult. And so I know for sure that, you know, that's a big part of it for me. And I wish that, you know, I know how strong you have to be able to do that without somebody in your house. And I really, like, you're so much stronger than me for sure. And I know that you know, I look up to you so much for that reason. And that in the beginning is a huge reason why we had switched the kids' diets over. And I think, you know, originally the kids were really small. And so we would put them to bed, and then Chris and I would like eat ice cream and stuff like late at night. And we did try to keep a lot of that away from them. We did baby-led weaning. You know, their first foods were like whole meats and vegetables and really like avocados. Penelope went through this phase when she was underweight, and so she was still nursing, but she would get like a whole avocado and a bunch of butter. I would mix like avocado and butter together, and that was her, like, we were trying to help her gain some weight, and I was using a lot of really good healthy fats and breastfeeding. And so like, I knew that what we were doing was not good for us, and so I wanted to avoid that with the kids. After Chris went into the hospital and was recovering, and we went through that whole point where he was just, life got crazy, as it does for everybody, and they ended up with a lot more chicken nuggets and the processed foods and the microwavable stuff. And so a lot of the reason why then, as they got older and were looking for more snack stuff, that we transitioned them to more low carb and cutting out the snacks, is just because Chris and I couldn't handle having that stuff in the house either. And so that was my selfish reason. I knew it wasn't good for them, but I also I couldn't handle having it in the house for a while. And so now they definitely are not strict carnivore. We really focus on 3 meals a day with them. They have fruit, they have some vegetables if they want. I'm not going to fight about vegetables. If Nathaniel doesn't want to eat vegetables, I don't care, because I'm not concerned about him needing them for his health. But other things like carbs and treats and things, you know, like they might have we don't keep them in the house just because I don't want them in the house. But they might have those things if they go to a party. And I think more than anything, it's so hard to know what to do, on how we all are just trying to raise our kids and like not make mistakes. And so my approach to how we deal with the kids is different than other people's. But we're all just trying to do what's right for them. And I'm just hoping for them that they can avoid a lot of these extremes that I went through. And I was raised like we weren't allowed to eat out. We didn't have soda. We didn't have treats. Like, my mom made homemade, it was bread, but it was like all homemade bread. Like, we didn't eat in restaurants. And so I went through this like extreme moving, you know, going to college and being near fast food. And so it's kind of part of the reason why we don't do 0 carbs with them always. I don't want them to have this like obsession about things that then they kind of go into later. I'm hoping to just teach them that, you know, you can have a treat occasionally, but not too often. And that, you know, I always say mom and dad had too much sugar for too long, and that's what made us really sick. And so I hope that they know that if you go to a party and you have a piece of cake on your friend's birthday, then let's go home and not eat sugar for a couple of days, because, you know, you already had some sugar, and now we need to just focus on protein for a couple of days. I really don't want them to have this like mindless eating habit. So they don't have snacks, you know, they don't like sit around and just like play games or watch TV and snack. It's like very specific meals that we have at the table. I don't know if we're doing the right thing, but my only hope for them is to help them grow up and be able to moderate things and not have to be in these extremes that I lived through. And hopefully they can kind of find a healthier balance, because I don't think my goal for the world is not for everybody to be 100% carnivore all the time. I don't think some people need that. Like, I think if you can eat protein and be healthy and live a balanced life, like whatever that is, okay, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with that personally. But I think a lot of us, myself included, can't handle that. And so I hope that they can avoid that.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky, like you. My husband is also carnivore. I had to struggle through without him for several months until he joined me in that. But yeah, that makes a big difference. When I was struggling without him, I would say, you know, I really would like some of that keto ice cream. I can't remember what it's called now. Rebel ice cream. And he would say, okay, and he'd get it for me. Like, I didn't have that person saying, you can't do that, you don't really want to do that, but he was looking for a reason to eat it too, so he would bring it to me.
Right.
And you had said that you travel a lot for work. We like to travel. So those videos that you do with like how you order in restaurants, those are so helpful, even if you're not traveling, if you're just out running errands and you realize that you're not going to get to eat for a while. Do you ever have restaurants not accommodate you or give you a hard time about that?
I would say no, only that nobody's ever just said like, no, you have to have the sides on your plate. I think I just have had restaurants that are just like, well, we aren't going to give you anything a la carte, or you have to pay full price. So the only risk is sometimes it's expensive. And then, you know, I've left restaurants before, like hungry and feeling like I overpaid for something. So that's really kind of the downside. But usually, I mean, it's funny because the internet thinks that that restaurants hate it when I come walk through the door or something, but I have never had a server like care. They're accommodating. It's like simple for them. It's not that hard. You know, we have a friendly conversation about it. I'm very nice about it. I tip them well. So I definitely have not ever had anybody just not be willing to do it. But sometimes they are just confused and don't know really what I'm asking for. So just anytime that you can say like, you know, I just really need some meat by itself and all I want is just meat on a plate. How can I do that? Is really the best way. And the servers are usually able to help you come up with something. Sometimes I've gotten the bill and been like, oh, that was expensive. But then I just know to avoid some of those in the future. And I kind of, at this point, have my go-tos that I feel like I get the most bang for my buck. And usually those are the ones that I stick to for that reason.
Yeah, that's usually the issue that I run into is when I try to order, even if I've seen like one of your videos or somebody else who's done something similar, and I try to order that way, and they're like, well, you get the sides anyway.
Right.
Don't want them, or they can't find the button to make it like a la carte or something like that. But yeah, it's frustrating, but it's nice. Those videos that you do are nice. They're helpful to show that it is possible to do that.
Yeah. And hopefully just asking a few questions or explaining, you know, if I'm somewhere new, I usually just always start with like, okay, all I want is a plate of meat. How can I do that? Like, here's what I think based on the menu, but do you know the better way for me to get that? And especially I end up in situations with a group of people a lot, and I don't want to like be the person asking 15 questions when there's 10 of us ordering and stuff. So I call ahead a lot. Or, you know, sometimes like I probably am not getting the cheapest and easiest and simplest way to do it. But, you know, if a burger with no bun is just as simple, and then I pick around it. If I'm with a whole group of people, then I kind of usually do it like, what's the simplest way on the menu for me to ask the least amount of questions? And then I just always travel with food to supplement if I'm still hungry when we leave. But when I'm by myself or just with my family, you know, it's a little easier to kind of ask more questions.
Good tips. Laura, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time and sharing all of these tips and sharing your journey with us. We really appreciate it. For everyone watching, thank you for hanging out with us today. We'll have all of Laura's links down below. She has Instagram, she has a podcast, Cutting Against the Grain. She's on YouTube. She has a private community on Locals. So you want to be sure to check her out on all of those. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share, comment, click subscribe, and turn on those notifications. And you can join us for live meetings and special guest speakers in the Heart Carnivore community on the Mighty Networks for just $10 a month. The link to join that community, along with all of the ways you can connect with us or book a coaching session, will be linked below. Until next time, thanks. Bye.
Bye.